Good evening, folks. And tonight we're going to talk about the brand new playoff poll about how it's going to work this year and and let's talk the top 25 of the playoff poll and how this one will work. Okay? So, here's how it works. Well, first off, we have number 1, Ohio State, who beat Penn State 38-14. They'll travel to Purdue. And then you got Indiana, who stomped Maryland 55-10 and they'll travel on the road to Penn State. So that'll be an interesting game. See how Penn State responds after that pounding by Ohio State, if they even have an answer. And then Texas A&M, who had a bye week, will travel to Missouri. And then Alabama, who also had a bye week, will host LSU. Then Georgia, who ended up beating Florida 24-20, will travel to Mississippi State, so that'll be interesting. And then Ole Miss, who shouldn't have any issues with the Citadel, who ended up beating South Carolina 30-14. BYU, who had a bye, will travel to Texas Tech, so that'll be interesting. And Texas Tech, we just talked about Texas Tech and BYU. Well, obviously, they'll take on BYU. Texas Tech takes on BYU after they just end up beating Kansas State 43-20. And then Oregon, who's coming off a bye, will travel to Iowa, which always is tough to win at. And we'll talk about teams and their respective ways of winning this upcoming tomorrow night when we get done with this. Now, Notre Dame, who has no affiliate with anybody, end up slipping past Boston College somehow, 25-10, will host Navy. Now, Texas, who got away from Georgia 34-31, got away from Vanderbilt 34-31, will travel to Georgia on November 15th. Now, Oklahoma, who beat Tennessee 33-27, will travel to Alabama on November 15th. And Utah, who also has a bye, ended up beating Cincinnati 45-14, will travel to Baylor on the 15th. So, 3 teams there with a bye week. Now, Virginia, who beat California 31-21, will take on Wake Forest. And Louisville, who sneaked past Virginia Tech 28-16, will take on California. And then we'll host California. And then you have Vanderbilt, who obviously lost to Texas 34-31, will host Auburn. And then Georgia Tech, who got upset by North Carolina State 48-36, will travel to Boston College on November 15th, so they also have a bye week. And then Miami, who was upset by SMU 26-20 in overtime, will host Syracuse. And then USC, who ended up beating Nebraska 21-17, will host Northwestern. Then Iowa, who had a bye, will host Oregon. Then Michigan, who slipped past Purdue, I don't know how they did that, will travel to Northwestern on the 15th. They also have a bye. So, a lot of teams here have a bye. Missouri, who just coming off a bye, will host Texas A&M. Now, Washington, who just had a bye themselves, will travel to Wisconsin. So, that'll be an interesting game. Pittsburgh, who just took care of business with Stanford 35-20, will also have a bye, but when they come back from their bye, they'll host Notre Dame. And then Tennessee, who just got done beating Kentucky 56-34, will host New Mexico State. So, these are your scores from your last games. So, Now how the playoff system works. The 12th and 5th seed, just like last year, winner there will take the 4th seed. The first round of 4, the first 4 games will be, one of them will be played on the 1st, will be played on the 19th, the rest will be played on the 20th. Then you have the Cotton Bowl, which will be played on one day. Then the Orange, the Rose, and the Sugar Bowl will be played the following day. And then you have the semifinals, which is like the Final Four. That'll be like the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl. One will be played on January 8th, the other one on January 9th. Then January 19th, you have the national title. Now, obviously the top 12 teams would be going, but Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, BYU, Texas Tech, Oregon, Notre Dame would be the ones going. Now, despite Texas and Oklahoma being there, Virginia would most likely be the 11th seed, and Memphis, even though they're not listed on here, will most likely get the 12th spot because of winning it outright, which a lot of people are very objective to that because they feel like the people who are ranked should be the ones that get it. But there's a lot of people from last year were saying, well, Ohio State's win should be illegitimate, considering they weren't league champs and didn't deserve to be there in the first place, considering they didn't win anything, they didn't beat their opponent, they didn't win their rival, and they didn't win their league title. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but look at Notre Dame. They're not in any league. Well, let's try to explain that. So, if Notre Dame is not in any league, but they would have won it all, they would have beaten Ohio State last year. Okay, does that make it illegitimate then? So let's try to figure this whole thing out here, people. Ohio State is illegitimate. The round one will be, game 1 will be December 19th. Then the other 3 will be those days. Now, seats 12 and 5, 9 and 8, 11 and 6, 10 and 7 will be either home games, will be hosted teams. 7, 6, 8, and 5 will be the host teams. 10, 11, 9, and 12, 9, 11, and 10 will all be the away teams. Winners will advance to play against the 1, 2, 3, and 4 teams in the whatever bowl game that they're hosted to, and the winners will go there. That's how that works. Then obviously so on and so forth. It's pretty much a tournament. That's literally what this is like. This is literally, let me show it to you. This is literally like what it looks like here. You got your 1 seed here, 3, 2, Indiana would be here, Ohio State would be here. Then you would have, pretty much this is how it would look. Ohio State would be here. Indiana would be here. Texas A&M would be here. If this was going on right now, if this is how it ended up to be. Texas A&M here. Alabama here. Ole Miss would be here. BYU here. Texas Tech is here. Oregon is here. Notre Dame here. And then you get, then over here, if the rankings were this, it'd be Texas here and Oklahoma here, but since that's not the case, it would be known as Virginia and Memphis. Virginia here, Memphis there. That's how that would normally work out. So, that's how the lining works. So, that's how that tournament would normally look right now if the tournament was going on right now. But since it isn't, that could all change. And if any kind of upset, we might do another round of this starting next week when the second round comes around. And now, with that being said, we'll talk about percentages of every win from here on out for the SEC on the what ifs will do happen tomorrow with the SEC and the Big Ten and every team that's actually fighting for that spot. We'll talk about that. With that being said, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.